Have you tried soaking your seeds for faster germination? This is actually something I didn't know about my first few years as a vegetable gardener, but once I tested it out, I knew it was something I'd have to do every growing season. Now, it's a little more nuanced than just putting seeds in water. And so I'm going to share with you my best practices and what I've learned and what makes this such an effective method, especially for me as a container gardener. You're likely wondering, does soaking even make a difference? And rather than tell you my thoughts, I'm going to give you an example from this growing season. So I amended my container beds back in early March, and I started with just a few of them. I was feeling really impatient. I was ready to get my garden growing. And so I had amended one of my container beds, and instead of taking the time to soak my seeds overnight, I went ahead and planted my snap peas right into the container. And then more recently, I was amending other containers. I like to do it in stages because it is time consuming. So I was amending my other containers, and I actually took the time to soak my snap pea seeds overnight. So the difference between these two is that the seeds that I did not soak overnight germinated and sprouted in 2 weeks, and the seeds that I did soak overnight germinated in 4 or 5 days. That's a significant difference. So why does this happen? Well, the seeds have an outer tough exterior that when you soak them in water, it's going to soften and allow that water to get further into the seed, which then prompts to start the germination process. I'm going to share with you how I soak my seeds, but before I do that, I want to touch on why I think this is such an effective method, especially for container gardeners. Now, if you're a container gardener like me, you're limited on space, and I like to grow in spring, summer, and fall. And so what that means is that every space in my container gardens is taken up by vegetables during each of those seasons. And so as spring is ending and getting closer to summer, it's starting to get time for me to put in my summer vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, zucchini, squash. And if my spring vegetables are still growing, then I have to make a decision to either get rid of them early, which I hate doing, or let them continue to grow to maturity and then delay my next season's vegetables. Also not ideal. So when you're soaking your seeds and you're getting them to germinate and sprout more quickly, you're giving them a little bit of that head start. And so with the peas, for example, like I said, the 2 weeks versus 5 days, that's pretty significant. And so if they start sprouting after 5 days and growing, they're that much closer to being ready to harvest and to the end of their growing season. And so I used frost covers to extend my growing season, and I soak the seeds that I can, and that allows me to be able to harvest a little bit earlier so that I'm constantly growing in my container gardens through all the seasons. The first thing to talk about is what kinds of seeds can you soak for faster germination? Now, technically, you can soak any vegetable seed, but for some of them, it's just not necessary. For others, it can be detrimental. And so I'm kind of picky on which ones I end up doing this method with. So I for sure soak my larger seeds. So that's going to be peas, beans, cucumber, squash, melon, pumpkins. These are all seeds that are going to be larger. And then there's also a few medium-sized seeds, and that's going to be Swiss chard and beets. And I soak those because they have that corky seed pod. And so soaking them in water really helps soften them up. Now, when we think about the smaller seeds, there's a couple reasons why I don't soak those. So one reason is that it's just not as necessary. They're smaller, they go to germination a little bit quicker than some of these larger seeds with the really hard exteriors. And then another reason that I don't soak them is that when they're wet, these small seeds get really hard to work with. So if I think about lettuce seeds or carrot seeds, they're really tiny, and I'm trying to, put them in holes into my potting mix. And if they're wet, I mean, they're not going to come off my fingers. I'll have to maybe use toothpicks, and it's just a much more challenging way to plant these seeds. And so if it's not really necessary and it just creates some added work for me, I don't really see the point in doing it. And so that's why I choose not to do those smaller seeds. So how do you soak the seeds for germination? Well, you need a container. I prefer to use glass, but you can use really whatever you want. And you're going to fill it with water to be above the seeds. You want to make sure to get it a good amount above because the seeds will soak up some of it. Now, when it comes to the water, if you live somewhere like I do, which is in the city, our water has a lot of additives to it, including chlorine. And so if I'm going to use tap water, I'm going to put it in the container and actually let it sit out for about 12 hours so that chlorine can dissipate, and then I'm going to put the seeds in. You could use rainwater and put the seeds in right away. Whatever water you use, you just want to make sure that it is room temperature. How long should you soak those seeds for? So for the larger seeds, like the peas, the beans, the cucumbers, the melons, I would recommend soaking for up to 24 hours. I usually just let them go overnight, and mine usually end up going about to that 24-hour mark. You really don't want to extend too far over that because what will happen is your seeds will actually drown. So they do need some oxygen to be able to germinate. And if they go too long underwater, they're going to rot and turn mushy, and it's just not a good situation. So I don't recommend longer than 24 hours for those larger seeds. For the medium-sized seeds, like the Swiss chard and the beets, I usually do about 4 to 6 hours. And then if you are interested in doing the smaller seeds and just trying it out, see how it goes, I would recommend not soaking those for more than like 2 hours. And for some of the seeds, like peas, what will happen is that when they come in the seed pack, they're going to be dry and kind of shriveled up. But by the time they're done soaking, they will have plumped up and soaked up that water. And so you'll actually see a noticeable difference in some of your seeds once they are ready. So once your seeds are done soaking, you're going to want to get them planted as soon as possible. You really don't want to let them dry out. So you put them in the potting mix, and you're going to want to make sure that you keep that soil moist until they have germinated and become seedlings. And there you have it. I hope you don't wait several years like I did to try this out, because it really is a great way to speed up that harvest and get your garden growing, especially if you have a small space like I do. I hope you found this information helpful.